It is Quantic time that we investigate options for financing your projects. It doesn't matter if you are looking to fund a new business idea or a side project. There are options at all levels. For instance, there are micro grants up to $5,000 for small side projects. For bigger business ideas, you have recurring grants, government funds, and crowdsourcing options. You can even go with advertising on your projects, sponsorships, and selling relevant merchandise. The final step is to look for venture capital, of course. I've just published an aggregate article from other sources, so I will use that as the basis for this video. If you know more funding options, let me know, so I will add that to the article. Now, let's go over each category of funding and analyze some examples. Alright, let's find out the article that I just published. It's in the guides, it's in the top section. The newer articles are always on the top. And the video isn't up because I'm shooting it at the moment. So let's check out with the first section of crowdfunding. I'm pretty sure you heard of Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and they are basically websites where you present your project or product and ask for public funding. Let's check out something random. It looks like a very well funded project. No, it's a board game extension. As you can see, it's very well presented, which helps with the funding rounds, as always. That's exactly how you should do public funding round like this. Maybe even add some videos to show the development progress and add some personalization to it. Indiegogo is an alternative for Kickstarter, and Patreon is also similar, but where Kickstarter and Indiegogo are one-time funding options, Patreon is a recurring option. If you are creating not a one-time product, but like a service, like a podcast or something, a recurring option is better because you're creating more and more stuff all the time. So Patreon and LibrePay and all that alternatives, or even Open Collective you can use for recurring donations. And also with something like Open Collective, you can demonstrate where you spend this money at. So this is going to be more transparent. I'm not going to go into that. You can check them out. One thing that I want to mention here is the Crowdfunder. Now, all the other options are targeted for private people. So private people that like your project and donate to it. But Crowdfunder is for finding investments from accredited investors. So you need to have a better business plan to be able to show up here. I'm going to assume that it's going to be much harder to collect funding here too. Let's check these guys out. Yeah, it looks like a pretty serious business idea. But they already even have business and sales. So yeah, if you have a more serious idea, you can go with the aggregated investors. And there's also the grant option. Now, grant is a one-time or a recurring lump sum of money for a project or an idea. It's given by organizations or the government. So let's check it out. Now the fast grants, it is for on the Facebook. They offer grants, help solve the recent problem. Let's check out Facebook actually. So they are offering up to 100 million in cash grants and ad credits, which is what I would expect. Facebook sells ads, so they will want to give out some of them to help themselves and help you in the same time. And obviously with cash grants, I'm going to assume this is not technology specific, but more general. And let's check out AwesomeFoundation. The AwesomeFoundation is an organization that awards 1,000 in grants every month. Alright, that's something new. That doesn't happen very often. Generally grants are one time, but they provide recurring money, which is good. And they don't want any compensation, equity, ownership, or return on investment. They simply want to help you build your product. Oh, that's awesome. And the name is AwesomeFoundation. It's pretty well with that. They funded a lot of projects. And again, this is not technology specific. So I'm going to assume you can solve any problem, create any business around it, or any project around it and get a grant. That's pretty good. Gitcoin, let's check it out. Gitcoin is a platform where you find funding for your code or code if you are a founder. Alright, so this is how it works. You have a project on GitHub and you create an issue, and that issue is costly. It will cost you time or money. So you create funding round for that specific issue. So this is, rather than funding an entire project, this is asking for a section of a project that can help benefit someone. Like there was a recent example of a bounty of $10,000 for a plugin for OBS. This happens a lot. You don't need to ask for funding an entire project, which might be too broad for investors or third parties like me who might be interested in investing in your business or idea. You might ask for funding for a very specific part of it, like small feature that can benefit a lot of people, including me. And I might be interested. I might go ahead and fund that project or issue of that project. All right, let's check out PSF grants. All right, this is Python Software Foundation. I won't read all of it, but I'm going to assume that if you have a project that benefits Python programming language, you can apply to it. This happens a lot with Java, Python, Clojure, and all of that. And you see here, if you have a project that will help internet grow or help an open source project on internet, you can apply to these. Let's check out TYK's Side Project Fund. Well, it sounds like a micro grant similar to AwesomeFoundation. And this is for side projects, so I'm going to assume they won't be hefty on requirements. They will be willing to fund very small, very side project type of things. That's pretty good. You can try it out. Let's check out Unitary Fund. Non-profit working to create a quantum technology ecosystem. All right. This also happens a lot. There is a very specific need in the technology. Someone creates a fund for it, like the quantum technology ecosystem, and they will be willing to provide small, big, or very substantial funds for research and people that want to invest seriously in it. But again, this is going to be quite a niche. I don't know anyone who is working on quantum technology at the moment. So there might not be very many people who could get this grant. And open source focused. As we've seen with the Python, this can happen a lot. There are a lot of problems that can be solved with open source. There will be a lot of governments and businesses that will benefit from these solutions. So they're going to offer grants. Let's check out InternetFonden of Sweden. All right. Looking at some of the projects, I can see that they are general things that benefit pretty much everyone. So again, if you are an open source minded person, these grants are heaven. I'm pretty sure they're going to offer a lot more money than the private people would. It also has a chance of being a recurring grant. So if your project is somewhat successful or it is promising, you can find continued support from these sort of government organizations. One final thing that I want to show is the Lemonade Stand Guide from Nayafia. This is something that I randomly stumbled on Hacker News. It doesn't list all the sources of funding. It's in my article, but it gives you a general idea of different kinds of funding. So I want to quickly go over it. So it starts with the donation button. This project doesn't have it, but let's find one that has. Well, this is an example of a donation button. Where you have a project that benefits people, they like it, they want to support you, and you put the project sponsor button like that. You can get it from GitHub, you can get it from PayPal, whatever, and ask for direct donations. Well, it's a good way of getting direct cash injection, but it's not sustainable in my opinion. So let's check out other options. Bounties. We went over the bounties with the Gitcoin. You can ask people to sponsor not the entire project, but parts of the small project. So you can get work done bit by bit. And again, this is going to be more sustainable, but again, it will involve more work, in my opinion. And obviously, you won't get that much money. And sponsorware, this was quite popular, but not as much anymore. So you go and contract companies to sponsor your work and list them as the sponsors of that project on the front page of that project. So it's like a cheap advertising for those companies and some funding for your project. Well, again, this is nice, and it's probably more sustained than one-time donations and Bounties, in my opinion, because companies will be willing to provide recurring funding as long as they see that they benefit from it. Crowdfunding, we went over that. Books and merchandise, advertising and sponsorships. This I can mention all in one. Well, if you have a project that can benefit people or people like something about your project, you can look for advertising on that project. You can create some merchandising of that project, like toys, t-shirts, whatever. That can be actual sustainable way of bringing your project to something more commercially successful. Let's check out one of them. So Lua programming language is selling books. Let's check out how expensive they are. Oh, it's okay. I'm going to assume cost of creating and publishing this book would be like $15. And the other $15 goes to the AwesomeFoundation. It's pretty good. In my opinion, the most sustainable way of starting a project is to create a project that relates to some work in another company. Let's say that you are creating a plugin for Unreal Engine that can benefit Unreal Engine itself. So you go apply Epic Games, say that you want to work for them, or you want to get hired to work on your project, which will benefit you as a person because you can commercialize that project in the future. And it will also help the Epic Games and Unreal Engine in the future. So it's a symbiotic relationship, and a lot of companies will be willing to provide funding or provide full-time job for you to work on your project. And it will also benefit you. You can also commercialize it in the future, depending on your agreement. I think that's an excellent way of starting a side project. But the catch is you need to be someone trusted or well-known in the community. So the company hiring you, like the Epic Games, will pretty much have to trust you or trust your project. This will be somewhat successful and their funding for it will not go to waste. It's the same thing with starting a project while currently employed. Instead of going to the company and starting a project, your company might have a project that can be open source. And once it's open source, it might get contributions from the open source community, which might benefit your company. And your company might be willing to fund you or employ you full-time just to work on an open source project. Some examples are Google and Go and Facebook and React, etc. If you have an open source idea or something that can be open sourced in your current business, you can go talk to your manager and ask to develop it as an open source project. Recently, open source projects have been immensely successful because you will get stuff like Go and React, and the type of feedback that they get from the community is invaluable. These projects wouldn't be what they are now if it wasn't for the open source community. So it's a very successful way of doing it, but it requires you to be a little bit diplomatic, a little bit like a marketing person, so you can sell the idea to your managers. And grants, we checked it out, consulting and paid support. You can always do that if your project becomes successful. Depending on it, you can provide some consulting, you can sell a private license for it. I have several stories, quite a bit of success doing that, so I'm going to go into that later. And software as a service is the ultimate end goal of any big project that starts as an open source project. Right? Let's say you have a small open source Slack clone. People deploy it in their companies, use it, but it requires maintenance. So you can start offering that open source project as a service. So you can give the people option to download and deploy it in their company, or you can give them the option to buy that software as a service for a yearly recurring fee, like $5 a person. So you can start making some income off of it while offering some added value on top of that open source service. So that's the whole idea. If you want to commercialize an open source or free project, you want to provide a higher value on top of what that lump sum of software offers. And providing that as a service that doesn't require deployment and stuff is a pretty good way of doing it. This strategy is also called open core, and you don't have to always provide it as a service. You can provide paid add-ons to it also, or you can have a restricted open source license and a commercial license that will require more than, I don't know, certain amount of people using it to pay for it, or companies beyond a certain size to pay for it. They all work, so you will have to experiment. Foundations and consortiums and venture capital. This is not the point of this article. These are more serious ways of looking for funding. These are more for well-prepared business ideas. I'm targeting mostly like small projects, so I won't get into it. And that's about it. If you like these guides or the article that I published, so you just go to the V1 GitHub button and go to the guides at the bottom, and you click on it and it takes you to the article. And if you want to change something or add something to it, you just click on this edit button and you can edit it and make a commit and make a PR, and I'll review it and I'll merge it. Same goes for all the other guides. It's pretty easy to contribute. Please do so if you have ideas. In conclusion, there are more funding options for your project ideas than you can ever imagine. However, you need to work on your ideas and make sure that they are realistic and sustainable. I'm sure that funding providers are getting bombarded with fraud attempts all day, every day. Just don't look like one of them and you should be good. Put in the effort to prepare your pitch deck and present your ideas nicely. The obvious first step in pitching your projects is to create a website. I have a detailed video on how to set up a free website with GitHub pages. If you want to check it out, the link is in the video description below. After your project is in a basic presentable format, you can start applying for grants to bring your project to life. If your project becomes a success, you can look for further funding to make it into a commercial success. In general, I would recommend looking for funding after developing your project as much as possible. This massively increases your chances of getting attention. Also, investors love it when they see a potential success in their hands. Good luck in your project journey and let me know of your failures and success so I can feature them in an article or a video.